Hi, welcome to the class. In this class, we're going to study employment law. And of course, you might be wondering, why study employment law? What's the benefits of studying employment law? Why is this class going to benefit what you're going to be doing in your life and in your job? Well, we'll start with this fundamental notion that employment is one of the most important institutions in our lives. I could say it's the most important. But yeah, I do have to respect family, maybe your marriage. But certainly past those two, employment is one of the most important institutions in our lives. And why do I say that? Well, we start with the fundamental financial aspect that employment is our greatest capital asset. And for most of us, it's our only capital asset. We are worth what we can earn. Unless you're independently wealthy, your ultimate wealth is going to be based on your earning capacity, your employment. When you go to the bank and you borrow money to buy a car, well, the bank doesn't think you have that $25,000 tucked away in a bank account somewhere. They loan you the money anticipating that you can work, and your employment will help you to repay the loan for that car. So just from a financial perspective, employment law, incredibly important. But more so than that is that our economic and our social systems are based on the concept of employment. We in the United States have built our societal infrastructure around the idea of employment. So, for instance, when it comes to retirement, many of you will retire and then collect Social Security. Well, the amount of money that you're going to get out of Social Security is going to be based on what? Your employment, the jobs you had while you were working. And of course, retirement from the other perspective of a pension or a 401k from your employer, again, based on employment. So in the future, your retirement is going to be based in large part on what it was that you did during your work life. And of course, we're all aware that the vast majority of Americans get their health insurance through employment. So this is another fundamental aspect of what we do that comes to us only because of employment. This is one of the fundamental problems with healthcare reform, is that really we have two healthcare systems. We have one for those people who are employed, and we have a separate one for those who are not. And since some people will never be employed, and yet people want their employment-based insurance, we've really got to reform two systems at the same time. Employment is where we form our friendships and our relationships. When you finish school, when you get out of school, you will realize that your circle of acquaintances is going to shrink. It's going to shrink pretty rapidly. And the core of that new group that you're going to interact with is going to be those people you work with. When you're in college, of course, it's very easy to meet new people. Every semester you have new classes with new people and new places to sit. And if you can't find anyone in those classes, then there are thousands of clubs that you can join. There's the Greek system. That's where your friendships and relationships come while you're in college. But in real life, once you get past that point, your friendships, your relationships, the people you know, are in large part going to be based on the people that you met through employment. That's who you're going to go to lunch with. That's who you're going to go out to have a beer with in the afternoon. People that you know from your employment. So that's another aspect of life that we get only from employment. And more than that, employment really forms the basis for our identity, both internally and externally. I say externally because, again, once you finish college and you get out into the world and you meet someone new, their first question to you may be, "What's your name?" But the second question is probably going to be, Well, what do you do? What do you do? And the fact is, whatever you answer that question, however you answer that question, the other person is going to immediately draw conclusions about you based on your employment. So if you say, I'm a elementary school teacher, person's going to think, well, must be good with kids, likes kids. If you are a nurse, well, must like taking care of people, must be a caretaker. If you're an accountant, well, good with numbers. So our identity is going to be in large part shaped by what it is that we do, even if internally we don't feel that way. But of course, we are internally shaped by employment as well. That in our minds we have an idea of what we do. I practiced law for a number of years before becoming a college professor, and when people ask me what do I do, my first instinct is still to say, well, I'm a lawyer. But that's not accurate. But yet that's still who I am on the inside. And so employment is going to form the basis for our identity. And so when you look at why study employment law, you're looking to get the rules for employment. When I used to introduce law to business law students, I would always explain the law is like the rules to the game. It's the rules that are going to guide how you play the game. And when it comes to employment law is going to govern the rules for your employment. And if I sat you down and said, here, let's play a game, and this game is going to determine your financial worth and your retirement capabilities and the health care you receive and the friends and relationships you have and the identity, who you feel you are, if we're going to play a game that determines all that, well, wouldn't you want to know the rules? But there's more to it than that. The study of employment law has additional benefits. Employment law is a complicated mix of statutes, regulations, and case law. We'll be talking about these more in detail, but in essence, unlike some areas of the law, say contract law, which is primarily based on statute, or tort law, which is based on cases, when it comes to employment law, it tends to be a blend of all of these things. And when you face an employment law question in your work life, one of the first things you're going to have to figure out is, where does this law come from? What's the source of this law? And employment law is constantly changing. There are some areas of the law that we don't touch much. For instance, the Uniform Commercial Code, the Article 2, which governs the sale of goods throughout the United States. Well, Article 2 hasn't been amended since the 1950s. Never changed. It's the same law. But employment law changes constantly. The employment law that we're going to be studying here will not be the same employment law that existed 5 years ago or the employment law that existed 5 years before that. So employment law is constantly changing. Another benefit to employment law is that it teaches you how to think analytically. Because in life, your problems are not going to come to you in the structure of a multiple choice question. Instead, your problems are going to be a big, muddied group of facts. And we're going to have to sort through those facts to determine what's the issue, what's the law that's going to be applied to that issue, and once we apply the law to that issue, well, what's the result? And so studying employment law teaches you to break down a big, messy set of facts into its smallest component parts. And you're going to take those lessons and be able to use them in other parts of your life as well. Employment law is about striking a balance. And that's one of the things, the sort of the meta themes to this course is the idea of balance, what it is that employment law is doing. And with employment law, you can see that the law is trying to balance the interest of employers, employees, and society as a whole. And the thing with employment law is that a decision, a law, a rule that benefits one party, say employees, may not benefit employers or may not benefit society as a whole. The best example of this issue that I can think of has to do with minimum wage. There is a certain minimum wage. There's an amount that says employees must be paid this minimum wage. Now, if we set that at $20 an hour, clearly that's going to benefit employees. You're going to get $20 an hour. But employers are going to have their cost almost triple. Society wants people to be able to afford to buy things because that's the way our system works, but we don't want to put companies out of business by making things too expensive. And so when we look at a question of what should the minimum wage be, what we're doing is looking at these three different parties, the employer, the employee, and society as a whole, and we're going to try and find a balance point between them, and that number is going to be our minimum wage. Finally, understanding how this balance is reached is important for you guys to understand employment law. So we will be talking in here about broader themes, broader societal themes that we address through employment law, primarily in our the discrimination section of the course. So in conclusion, what do we know? Employment is one of the most important institutions in our lives, that the study of employment law has additional benefits, and finally, employment law is about striking a balance. And that's it. Welcome to the class.